My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. In 1970, the Moody Blues released a groundbreaking album entitled A Question of Balance. Dawning is the Day was one of the songs on the album written by lead singer and guitarist Justin Hayward. The lyrics said in part, "So rise, let us see you. Dawning is the day. Misty meadow, you will find your way. Wake up in the morning to yourself, open your head and look around you. Listen, we think we have found you." The theme of the album was addressing the seemingly unanswerable questions and finding the answers in the recognition of our humanity, compassion, and love. In 2020, the questions seem deeper, much more difficult to answer, and almost insurmountable. Is there a way that we may reawaken to who we truly are, find that balance, and live with love? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Amoda Maa, says there's a path to awakening and balance. Amoda Maa is a spiritual teacher, a warrior of the heart, sharing a fresh approach to the age-old search for spiritual freedom. Her teaching features timeless truths in ways that are highly relevant and alive to this moment for contemporary seekers willing to go to the raw edge where spirituality meets humanity. Since 2012, Amoda has been offering meetings and retreats to support and deepen the living of the awakened life. She's been a speaker or guest teacher at a variety of conferences, featured in several magazines, interviewed for numerous broadcasts and podcasts, and has written 4 books with translations in 5 languages. She lives in New Mexico. Her website is www.amodamaa.com, and she joins us this week to share her path, her wisdom, and her new book, Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Amoda Maa. Good evening.
Good evening, Victor. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Actually, it's 5 books. This is the 5th one.
This is the 5th one. We have to update your biography.
Yes.
So, Amoda, please share with us about your early path and before your awakening.
Very traumatic. I used to say that I felt like living in a shoebox. I was very constrained emotionally, psychologically. I had an incredibly strict father. My roots, my ancestry was unknown, and there was always a veil of secrecy around that. And so I was brought up not knowing who I am, not really knowing whether my parents were my real parents. There seemed to be some lie around that I wasn't being told, but I could feel it because I could hear the whispers as well. And there were many traumas from finding out that my father wasn't my father under very difficult circumstances. And he then retracted from being my father, and to very sudden changes in home environment, in schooling environment. I was a child around 10 years old during the Turkish Cypriot War in the Middle East, in Cyprus, in the 70s. So we had bombers and all sorts of things happening. And many other details, which are far too many probably to even remember. But I ended up being mute. That's what happened to me. I lost my voice, more or less, not completely, but pretty much, partly because of the war and the fear that induced in me, and not being taken care of by my parents, and being made homeless, returning back to England with absolutely nothing but a pair of shorts and a T-shirt, and being homeless for a while. And then the traumas that I had at school, And with my father's increasing alcoholism and violent temper, which became physical, there was an element of sexual abuse in that, certainly a transgression of boundaries. And so I just didn't speak. That was the result of it. It's kind of ironic that I've become a public speaker. But I just lost my voice. And that became an emotional shutdown as well. So I ended up in my late teens, early to late 20s, classified as clinically depressed. And even though I managed in the end, I was a high achiever at school, so all these shocks and traumas really set me back, and I had to work really hard to overcome that. But I did end up just about getting through to study at university, the University of London. But during that time, I was classified as clinically depressed. I was completely isolated. I had no social interaction with anybody. I was a mute. I was an extreme introvert. And I was taken to various psychologists and psychiatrists, and none of them could actually get me to speak. So we didn't get very far with that. I was so shut off. It was unbelievable. I did attempt suicide several times. And still I managed to get my academic qualifications. And then something dramatically changed in my late 20s. A combination, I think, of, well, it was my Saturn return, so I was 28, and that's a major time of transformation. Many suicides happen around that time. We know that in public figures like Kurt Cobain, I think Amy Winehouse, and so on, who all killed themselves around the age of 28, 29, and that was my thing as well. I came to a point where this is it. I tried several times, and this was it. I needed to have a breakthrough of some sort, or to see the meaning of life, to really see God, even though God wasn't something that I believed in. I was pretty much an atheist, and I just needed something. And so otherwise that was it. I was out. And three things I think came together around that time. One was I did have a boyfriend at the time, and he was a long distance runner. And even though I was completely unathletic, unsporty, no interest in physical exercise whatsoever, he managed to drag me out running. And somehow, even though I was extremely unfit, I managed to build up to 6 or 7 miles. And I experienced a transcendent experience. In those days, I think that was the early 80s, there wasn't really any talk of the runner's high, and there was no real understanding of the correlation between physical fitness, aerobic fitness, the peak experience, transcendent experience, and loss of ego self. And that's what I experienced, even though I had no framework for it. I went on to dedicate my PhD research to that very topic. There were only 4 studies in the whole world that had touched on that topic, and they were all American studies. I was in London, and I decided that this would be a groundbreaking avenue of research. Plus, it fascinated me on a personal level and on an academic level. That's another story. But at the same time, around that time, I touched on TM somehow inadvertently. It didn't work for me. It made me even more in my head. But somehow it opened the door to an interest in meditation. I also had an experience with psychedelic substances, also completely out of the blue. I was such a good girl. I had not even smoked it or drank anything, maybe a few drinks, but nothing more than that. And since I wasn't social, I had no friends, there was no way I could come across that kind of recreational behavior. Somehow it ended up in my lap, so to speak. And I had no preconceptions. I had no framework for it. I had no background in music or social movements. I was completely in a shoebox. I was, even though I lived in one of the biggest cities of London. But it opened a doorway. So that, together with the long distance running, touching on meditation, blasted me open. And I had an experience. I didn't call it an awakening then. I don't think that word was bandied around then. I had no background in spirituality or enlightenment, interest in any of that. I was more an existentialist, sort of psychological existentialist. But I had what I would then, afterwards, once I'd read about it, compared to the experience that Ram Dass had, where all ego, well, not all ego identity, but a large amount of my ego identity was seen to be false, seemed to be an illusion. And primarily my identity in the academic world. I was very identified with that. And I'd spent, I think it was about 12, 14 years in the academic world. And it just blasted a hole. And it brought very abruptly to an end all desire to be anything. So my PhD research after 7 years came to a grinding halt. Lots of things happened. My boyfriend and I split up very suddenly after 7 years. He lost his business and lost a huge amount of money. We were unable to live. So actually I became homeless. I had no access to any money at all. I had no access to any resources. I had no access to my family, what little family I had. I had no access to any skills to make any money. I got expelled from the academic arena. It all became an illusory path for the ego self. So I became a nobody very, very quickly, literally, sleeping on people's floors, and nobody knew anything about me for a while. And I entered a whole different sort of world for a number of years, and it led me to India. And in leading me to India, somehow I had the resources to get there. And in leading me to India, it opened another door, which was the spiritual path. And that had many facets to it. And I don't need to give a list of all the different things that I tried. But it's like I made a complete shift from being in my head to being in my soul, And still I wasn't seeking anything. I was just exploring. And this went on for about 7 years. But what I learned throughout all of that was, and I didn't learn it conceptually or intellectually, just energetically, because of the way my life was going. It was so broken. It was so devoid of any support or resources, that I learned the art of surrender, surrender to what is. I had no choice, really. And that surrender took me to ever deeper places within myself, and a capacity to, I guess, meet what was in my experience. It's like it really expanded something for me. Well, one thing led to another. I ended up, after many years of being nobody and doing nothing and living on a very low level of material support, I felt I had to give something back to the world. So I somehow downloaded, if that's the right word, a method of working with the body, working with the breath, and working with ecstatic movement. So almost Sufi-like crazy movement for letting go, for releasing, opening, cathartic, and so on. So it was a kind of moving meditation. And I just started doing that in London. And it picked up after a number of years and became quite a thing in central London, where many people were coming. And I just learned how to work with people. So I managed to kind of build my life up. It wasn't, anything spectacular, but it gave me such a sense of joy, and I was really learning about energetic surrender. Now, I was still on a kind of spiritual path with meditation and so on. Nothing specific, just a hodgepodge of all sorts of things. But I came to a place in myself where there wasn't anything that I was looking for. And in that space, one thing did happen. I had a major breakup with my partner then that I'd been with for 10 years, and that was a very dramatic relationship, dramatic and passionate relationship. And I thought I'd be with him forever, but it was incredibly traumatic as well as dramatic. And in the breakup, I ended up living on my own, and I hadn't done that for many years. And whilst there was a lot of joy in the work I was doing, I experienced a deep sense of abandonment, which I worked on psychologically and to do with my parents and so on and so on. And I came to a place of peace with it. Actually, it was a great relief to be alone. And then, so by then I'm in my early 40s, and then something revealed itself that was totally unexpected. And I would call that waking up out of the dream of separation at the core level.
And what was that happened? What happened?
In the few, I think it was a couple of years of being alone. And again, I was quite a solitary person apart from the work I was doing, which was, leading workshops on a monthly basis. I was pretty much 100% solitary, not socially active, and that was fine with me. It suited me. But in that space of spending so much time alone, and alone in a gentle space of surrender to what is, I came up it sort of started to envelop me what I called then and call now a dark night of the soul. And it had nothing to do with my circumstances. Nothing bad was happening. In fact, there was a lot of, as I said, peace and joy in my life. But it revealed an existential aloneness, an existential abyss. And this went on for several months, and there was no cause for it. There was no reason for it. There wasn't a problem. But it just dawned on me, and because I spent so much time alone, I could be very sensitive to it. And I noticed, and like I said, I am a practiced meditator, so I'm familiar with that inner landscape, if you like. But I noticed a very subtle movement of mind, the subtle movement of mind that pulled me away from being with that existential abyss. And it was so subtle that it could easily be overlooked. But in seeing it, I felt and sensed and that this was a pattern, the archaic pattern of ego self that is always moving away or moving towards something, never resting fully in the present, because the present is death to the ego. And again, I didn't know this intellectually, I just felt it. It's like the whole lifetimes of practice and insight and searching all came to a moment of realization. And so I kept still in my mind, and it was effortless, but it also was it caused me to meet such an existential terror of annihilation. And I could easily have just got up. I was in my living space, and I could easily have got up and picked up a book off the bookshelf. I love to read, and my books are very inspirational. They were at the time. And that was a way of moving away from death, the death of ego self, because the book would inspire me, then I'd feel good. Or it might be as simple as making a cup of tea, a very English thing to do. And it's very nourishing and soothing and so on. But I just noticed how that was an obstacle or an obstruction to falling into the abyss of emptiness, where there is an end of the self. And so I just faced it. And in facing it, I didn't expect anything. I just knew that was the right thing to do. But in doing that, and it's quite hard to remember the experience, which is why I'm pausing here, because it was quite a long time ago. But the sensation was of dying. It was a death of me as a separate entity, because as I met the existential abyss, I also felt the terror of aloneness, not an aloneness of the personhood, but an existential aloneness, that there's a me here and a vast universe of existence, the whole of existence that is spread over time and space, that that the me is a separate me. Yeah, it's a tiny, insignificant, and also separate me in this vastness of existence. And as I sort of died into that, it was like a death, and it did remind me of the attempts of suicide, at least on a psychological level. And this time I surrendered into it, knowing, obviously, that there was no physical death in it, but it was a profound psychological death. But the amazing thing was that the sensation, the energetic, visceral sensation, was of merging into the totality of existence, rather than disappearing into the totality of existence. Well, it was that, but it was also a merging into it. So I became the totality of existence. And so I called it merging into God. And I've done enough tantric and shamanic work to recognize that energetic merging. Yeah. But this was total. And when I came out of it, and it must have lasted just a nanosecond, I don't think it was very long, but it seemed like an eternity at the time. It's like time and space collapsed. When I came out of it, I didn't think, oh my God, I'm enlightened now, or I've awakened. I didn't think anything. But I was it's like I was very new, like I'd been born in innocence, like I'd been born and something was very fresh. And from that moment on, somehow I was able to live life, each breath, each moment, each step, yeah, in full presence and full openness. It's like the identity, all like layers of identity, all separation just dissolved. I am life is what I came to. I am life. There isn't life out there happening to me. I am life. And I understood what Jesus said when he said, I am the way. I'm not quite sure. I mean, my knowledge of what Jesus said is not 100% in any way, because I didn't read all that. But didn't he say, I am the light, I am the way, or I am life, I and life are one, or something like that?
What a wonderful, wonderful awakening. My guest is Amoda Maa. She's the author of Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. Amoda, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
Well, you can find out about my work, my website, amodamaa.com. That's Ma with a double A. And the book, Falling Open in a World Falling Apart, which was just released 2 weeks ago, is available on Amazon, is available on Barnes & Noble, probably many other online stores, and also directly from the publisher's website, which is Larson Publications.
And we'll be back with more of Amoda Maa and Falling Open in a World Falling Apart after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that we can give our daughters everything they need to grow and learn. But not every child can focus on classes and play dates.
Nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. face hunger. That's 1 in 6. School lunch might be their only meal each day, and it's heartbreaking to imagine any child going to bed hungry. We're dreaming of a perfect day when kids can smile, play, and just be kids without worrying about where their next meal will come from. Feeding America is working to make that perfect day a reality.
Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste. That food is given to families and children in need. Being a kid should be about doing things that make an ordinary day extraordinary. Learning to play an instrument, building a sandcastle, hosting tea parties. Hunger should never be an obstacle to growing up.
You can help end childhood hunger in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hey everybody, it's time for today's STEM tip. Want to know how to make your selfies even better? Okay, let's use science. The best time for photos is golden hour. That's the moment right before the sun sets, when the atmosphere scatters blue and violet wavelengths, making perfect, soft, and golden selfie light to show off that beautiful face of yours. Click. Check out Chic and STEM for more inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Amoda Maa. We're going to be talking about her book, Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. You've said that life is the guru. What does this mean?
I mean that life, and this was how it was experienced prior to awakening and after awakening in my own experience, life itself is always inviting us to surrender. And surrender is a vital component of awakening. I sometimes say that awakening itself is in some ways easy because it happens. It just happens. You have no control over that. At some point in some lifetime, it happens. But that's not the end of it. Surrender to awake consciousness is vital. And life is the ongoing invitation to that. So it doesn't stop after, it doesn't stop at an awakening experience or even at full awakening. It then has to be embodied and lived. And how is it embodied and lived? Because everything that we experience in our intimate relationships, in our worldly interactions, in the work that we do, every single aspect of our lived experience is the invitation to meet that experience from the depth of our innermost. In other words, our natural and innate state of open awareness that is not a given after awakening. It's an ongoing invitation, because very often awakening happens, but it's somehow separated from the mess or the challenges or the difficulties of everyday life. And it's especially true in the realm of intimate relationships, because awakening is really of the mind. I don't mean of the intellect. I mean, it's a quality of the mind. We have a different view. From having a dualistic view, we have a non-dual view. So that's the end of separation. There's no longer a me having an experience separate from life. There's a sort of 360-degree revolution of consciousness where you see not from the myopic viewpoint of the ego, but from the totality. But when that awakening remains as a waking up out of ego self, it can stay there, but it needs to inevitably flow into the heart. And in the heart is where we experience defendedness from past experiences, armoring, especially in intimate or close relationship. And for awakening to be fully lived and fully breathed, our experience, our life experience through our relationships, through the places that we're triggered, where the places that we revert to reactivity or defendedness, that has to be purified. So life is always inviting us to know ourselves and to meet life from the openness of that is not just of the mind, but of the heart and of the whole being.
So you say that we should be fully awake and fully human at the same time.
Yes, and that can be misunderstood to mean that it's okay to be human in the sense of being reactive or having the same unconscious patterns, whether they're behavior patterns, addictive patterns, and so on. That's not what I mean. What I mean is going back to what's just been spoken of, where awakeness has to filter into our humanity in order to be embodied and lived. And that filtering into our humanity is a purification process that brings an end to defendedness, brings an end to the violence, the inner violence that comes from rejecting our experience or bypassing our experience. it's really the same as saying being in the world but not of it.
Yes. How would you describe openness?
Well, I speak about openness in many different ways because they're all the words are pointers to it. It's not a thing that can really be encapsulated in words, because any attempt to do so makes it conceptual, makes it a thing, makes it an idea, puts an image into people's heads as to what it is, and then the personality self, or the personhood rather, tries to emulate that openness or learn techniques to be open and so on. And really what I'm pointing to is much deeper than that. What I'm really pointing to with the word openness is our essential nature as open awareness, or we could also say silent awareness, that which is here prior to the birth of self, prior to the content of our experience, prior to any thought or any feeling. It's the space within which every experience appears and disappears. So we could use the metaphor of the sky that is always here. It's not a thing. It doesn't have a boundary. It doesn't have a beginning or an end or a top and a bottom. It's timeless. You can't locate it. And it's always here. And our experience, if you like, our life is, we can liken to the clouds. Yeah? But our attention, most of humanity's attention, is on the clouds, the content of their experience. It's good, it's bad. I want to hold on to it. I want to reject it. I hate it. I love it. It's wrong. It shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be happening to me, and so on and so on. And that is the unconscious state. So I'm talking about the recognition of that which is more present, more intimate, closer than close, deeper than deep, which is essentially who you are. Not really who you are, but what you are.
Yes. Many people advocate setting boundaries as a way of protecting themselves emotionally and spiritually. Why doesn't this work?
Well, there's healthy boundaries, in the sense of being able to, or having the capacity to say yes and no according to your inner authority. So when I speak of surrender, very often that gets mistaken for saying yes to everything. And you can say yes to a harmful situation or an abusive situation or something that's outlived its purpose. You've outgrown it. So it's not about saying yes in that way. So there are healthy boundaries, but creating psychological boundaries in order to protect yourself, did you say?
In order to protect themselves, yes.
From being hurt or from being abandoned or from being rejected, that's a false protection, because it simply creates an armoring around the heart. So the heart is then not open, there is no vulnerability, and there is no honesty. When we create boundaries, psychological boundaries, to protect ourselves from being hurt or abandoned or rejected or disagreed with or misunderstood, then not only do we tighten and become defended and become dishonest with our own feelings. So we then create mental and emotional acrobatics to pretend that we feel something that we don't feel. So It's a great cover-up.
Absolutely. What do you share with those who feel that they need to continually search for a path?
Well, there's two types of searching. There's the searching for a path in the sense of always looking for the next thing, or the kind of tendency these days for a spiritual pick and mix, and grass is always greener on the other side. I'll try this spiritual technique, or I'll follow that path, and that's the way, and so on and so on. And that becomes a spiritual shopping bag. And that spiritual shopping bag gets filled with experiences and concepts and things, and simply add to the spiritual ego. So there's that kind of searching. And there's also the kind of sincere seeking. I would call it a sincere longing to come home. And coming home is the end of the search. It's the full stop. It's the dying into this. This is all there is. This. And there's such a suchness in this. There's such a deep acceptance in this. This is the surrender. So it's paradoxical. On the one hand, stop the search. On the other hand, have a burning desire, a longing to come home that is primary, that is beyond any other desire.
Her name is Amoda Maa. Her book is called Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. We'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is David Strickle. I'm excited to share my brand new show, The Stream of David Live, right here on OMTimes Radio. Each week I'll have exciting guests and I'll channel the eternal wisdom of the stream, a group of non-physical entities whose teachings have transformed lives all over the world. So join us for an uplifting hour each Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. That's The Stream of David Live right here on OMTimes Radio.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Look out, world, we're getting strong. The future's here and we belong. She can STEM, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Or clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can STEM, so can you. Find a cure, invent something new. There's no challenge in the world that she can't face. She can STEM.
Learn more at She Can STEM. A message brought to you by the Ad Council.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. That's doihaveprediabetes.org.
Wait, did they just say 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes? That's 33.33333% of adults. That means it could be me, my boss, or my boss's boss, or me, my favorite sister, or my other sister. That's 7 members of my 21-person romantic book club. Wait, the 1 in 3 could be me, my karaoke partner Carol, or my karaoke enemy Jeff. I'm going to take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Amoda Maa. We're talking about her book, Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. In your book, you say the beloved is inside every experience. Who is the beloved?
Oh, well, again, it's not a who, it's a what. It's pretty much the same as saying life is the guru. When I use the word beloved, I am pointing to, again, the invitation of life to meet what is here in your experience, the direct experience, the felt sense of this experience, without resistance, without avoidance, because everything, even the most difficult situation or circumstance, even the most turbulent or unbearable feeling or emotion, is an invitation to love. Why is it an invitation to love? Because when we are gentle towards our experience, being gentle towards our experience means we do not try to push it away or reject it. There's no narrative that says this shouldn't be happening. It is happening. I am feeling like this. Yeah. When that narrative isn't there, and there's only the gentleness of meeting what is here, then everything that appeared to be so unbearable, everything that appeared to be a punishment, it softens. It's an energetic entity, if you like. I don't mean that as a being that exists outside of self, but an energetic mass of energy that when we meet it in gentleness, when we meet it in acceptance, when we meet it in, this, it softens. And that energy dissolves and returns back to source in your heart as love. That love is just the okayness of what is here. It's a tenderness. It's a gentleness. It's a quietness. And in that way, everything returns home to source in you. When we meet it with violence, in other words, this shouldn't be happening, I don't want it, it's a punishment, it's wrong, or I'm wrong, and then there's a rejection, a resistance, an avoidance, a tightening, then that energetic mass, whatever it is, that feeling, that emotion, that experience, that felt sense, that sensation, it solidifies and just stays in place. So it's trapped, and you're trapped. Both are imprisoned, and that creates separation. There's a thing out there, a feeling, an emotion, an experience I don't want, and it becomes a thing. And that's how we perpetuate the separation of the ego self. That strengthens the ego self. Everything dissolves back into love. Love is not the same as liking, but the love that is our essential nature as openness. It's a deep okayness with what is, because what is. Yeah? So it's ridiculous and insane to fight what is. And it just transforms everything. That's the beloved. The beloved is inside everything. That's the merging that I spoke of in my experience of awakening. The world and life itself became the beloved. It was a tantric experience. No more separation.
One of the greatest gifts we can give each other is presence. Often this is something we fail to even offer ourselves. How may we be more present with ourselves?
Presence is... See, everything leads back to the same place. Presence is the ability to be with what is, or the willingness to be with what is. When we give our allegiance to the narratives of the mind, this shouldn't be happening, this shouldn't be happening to me, and whatever might follow from that, which is usually something to do, I'm not worthy, or I'm not special enough, or I'm not loved enough, or I'm not spiritual enough. When we give our allegiance to those narratives, which is the mass of humanity's unconscious state, we cannot be present with the depth of our innermost experience and the depth of our innermost nature. Being present is turning our allegiance away from that narratives to the most intimate experience that there is, which is our I amness. Just this simple I amness. That's very kind, that's very gentle, that's very tender. Again, it's a death of the ego self, so for many people there is resistance to that. But as you touch it and feel it and sense it, there's such a peace in it, there's such a relief in it that, hopefully one would turn towards it more and more.
And as you say in your book, tenderness is surrender.
Yes. I mean, one of the questions that I get most often, or very often in my teaching, is how to do surrender. But surrender isn't a how-to. It can't be done with the mind. It can't be done with the ego self. If we could turn our attention, instead of trying to learn how to surrender or understand how to surrender, it would be better to be tender towards what is in your experience. And when I speak about tenderness, I would say most people, 100% of people understand what that is, because we've all been tender somewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What would you like readers to take away from Falling Open in a World Falling Apart?
It's a message of encouragement, perhaps, to not be afraid of what appears to be falling apart, whether that's in our personal lives or on a worldly level. Because it's the most potent invitation to a transformation of humanity on an individual and collective level that is so necessary and so ripe, and that has enormous gifts and blessings, the blessing of freedom, the blessing of love, the blessing of peace, that... Yeah, the book really, I mean, I didn't write it because the world was falling apart. I wrote it before that, and even the title was there before that. So it's kind of strange that it all happened as the book was being written. I was really talking about the process of awakening, yes, and pointing to that. Really based on the many dialogues I've had with people. So it was born out of weaving those dialogues together. And but it is a message not just for the individual waking up, it is a collective message that we are standing at this incredible time I call it a bifurcation point where we could collapse back into ego, or we could really wake up. And it's not just a spiritual thing. And I think that's probably something I'm that might come from the book, that it's not just for spiritual seekers. It's not just about getting enlightened, although it is that as well. But it is openness, I think, speaks to it more broadly and than speaking about awakening or enlightenment, because openness is something that most people will recognize, usually on the surface level, but as we dialogue on a deeper level, and that it's more accessible. And I feel that that's what's happening in the world. That's why we're here at this point in humanity.
Absolutely. Her name is Amoda Maa. Her book is called Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. Amoda, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
The book's available on Amazon, it's available on Barnes & Noble, and it's available directly from the publishers Larson Publications. And you can find out about my work at my website, which is amodamaa.com.
Amoda, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this very important message.
Thank you, Victor. It's been delightful having this conversation with you.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.